The Starside Prophecy by Tirri. Read by the author. Chapter 34. As We Forgive Those. Amarissa, Garbine, Tirri, Gabriella, Marisol and Zita were enjoying a lazy day in the apartment they shared at Eden. Eden, a palace proportionally and architecturally, faced a square and was set amid acres of manicured grounds endowed with every fruit tree Melchizedek had ever created. To the rear, an enormous maze of boxwood was tended daily by the horticulturalists, responsible for the most delicate pruning of the 8-foot-high hedges. A series of perfumed rose gardens, with secluded picnic areas amid bird baths and koi ponds, lay beyond the maze's borders, and parrots, puffins and geese flew above, tranquil and unhurried, and landed willingly on the hands of those who reached for them. The vast interior of Eden comprised a series of inconnecting wings, divided into an array of sumptuous apartments that had been designed to accommodate a solitary guest or a group of souls. Housekeepers silently moved around each wing, tending to the needs of those recuperating. All guests would at some point be required to leave Eden, but the choice was theirs. They could stay for 3 days or 3 months, longer if need be. Each soul would eventually recommence the wider spectrum of their afterlife activities, but until then, Eden was home to those who needed a breather. Tirri and Zita were lying on a settee, their heads resting on the arms facing each other. They were crocheting the squares of a blanket that would eventually unite to form the whole. Marisol was sitting in an armchair reading the teachings of Don Juan, and Gabriella was sitting opposite writing her diary. Amarissa was lolling on a beanbag listening to Garbine, who was playing the cello beside the fire. The quality of the sounds created by Garbine's novice fingers was outstanding. "Boo!" said Salvatore, sticking his head around the door. He then walked into the room and closed the door behind him. The women were not startled. They had been told to expect his arrival by a note handwritten on official stationery with the insignia of the Department of Energy Realignment embossed on the top. The note had been pushed under the door the evening before. Salvatore walked across the room and hugged each of the ladies one by one, infusing them with love and appreciation before sitting down in the only vacant armchair. Salvatore smiled as he marvelled at the 6 beautiful souls looking at him. The ladies were all wondering what motivated Salvatore's visit, and picking up on this, Salvatore decided not to beat around the bush. These women deserved frankness. "Okay, my lovelies, let me tell you why I am here." Salvatore smiled, his authority and confidence unmistakable. The ladies were not rattled, but they were curious. They knew without being told that something was required of them. "The first and most crucial step in the rehabilitation of my latest charge needs to happen before any progress on his part or yours can commence. Do not be intimidated by this statement, but my charge's immediate destiny is in your hands. Your destiny is also in your hands. The soul, I hope you find it in your heart to forgive, is sitting on the other side of the door. You know who he is. I will not ask him in unless you approve." The ladies remained impassive, but Zita's palms were sweating. She was the youngest of the souls present, and her death at her murderous hands had been the most humiliating. The women were all adjusting to this new turn of events, and a semi-comfortable silence followed as the combination of shock and incredulity found a resting place within their psyches. Salvatore waited patiently for each to begin metabolizing the essence of what was being asked. Each looked as sanguine as could possibly be expected, but he knew their minds were struggling with the request. Several more minutes passed before Salvatore spoke again. "Since undergoing your life reviews, you are all in a better position to understand that any degree of unforgiveness is hypocritical. You only have to recall some of your own past behaviours to know that no soul is able to sit in the seat of the scornful for very long. It is also important for you to know that forgiveness is an aspect of unconditional love that promotes the greatest amount of freedom within your own soul's vibratory field. As the women pondered Salvatore's words, he noticed the luminous colour spectrum of each of their auras. He could see some traces of trepidation still remained, which was not cause for concern, but warranted a few more words of pastoral guidance before he introduced them to their murderer. Ladies, we must forgive each other always. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. The man who trespassed against you is not the same man who is here today. Again, the man in the hallway is not who he was at the time of his heinous treatment of you. You have nothing to fear. With your permission, I would now like to show him in. Zita and Garbine took in and let out their breath in unison, and Amarissa tried her best not to fidget as she summoned the confidence to respond. Before anyone else had a chance to speak, she said, "Go ahead, bring in the pervert." The crudeness of her request instantly assuaged the tension, and each of the ladies began to laugh, not hysterically but forcefully, with genuine humour as the motivation. Salvatore laughed too. Amarissa stood up and positioned herself in front of the fire with her back to it so she faced the door. The other women immediately got up and flanked her, displaying a show of strength that could only be found in numbers. Salvatore waited for the signal that they were ready, which came from Amarissa in the form of a nod. "You are absolute darlings. I know this is difficult, but I want you to know that I truly and deeply appreciate your compassion and your dignity, and so does McIseldeck, who is watching remotely." With the mention of the godsons' names, the flames instantly whooshed out of the fireplace and enveloped each of the ladies, but the flames were cool and soothing, and in that moment all tension evaporated. Salvatore got up and walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. The women remained in front of the fire, silent, alert and peaceful. Lucero, Fernandez, Eduardo, Aguado were sitting on a wooden bench in the hallway outside apartment 12888C. He was twisting his fingers and his mouth was dry. "Come in, amigo," said Salvatore, gesturing towards the open door. Lucero swallowed and counted to 10. He then stood and tentatively followed Salvatore into the room, which smelled of hyacinths and hickory. The women he had mutilated and disposed of were facing him in the chronological sequence of their demise. The fire behind them cast an orange glow over their silhouettes, and the expressions on each of their faces were not as he would have expected. Each woman radiated something that felt akin to benevolence, but Lucero still possessed a deep compulsion to flee. Lucero, who had been back Starside for over a week, had initially been confined to the Department of Returns and was still overwhelmed by the love he received from all those who seemed to take a genuine interest in his well-being. Every staff member had offered words of encouragement, and all knew what he had done. Lucero's earthly offences were matter-of-factly spoken of, nothing glossed over or brushed aside. It was as if he and all those around him were partaking in a discussion regarding the proper consistency of pancake batter. During his life review, Lucero had watched himself in all his pitiable glory, the pathetic star of the silver screen. With speed of intention thought, Lucero's guide had been able to access any timeline and bring forth visual images with sound pausing and zooming when a point needed clarification or emphasis. Scene after wretched scene of a family as twisted as he played out. Lucero watched his ump rape him with the tip of her umbrella, and then the following morning she brushed his hair while she stared at his reflection in the mirror. His guide then brought another scene to life of a middle-aged French nanny making him breakfast. She had introduced him to a world no 8-year-old boy should ever have seen. Another scene played out of the nanny masturbating Lucero while he looked at aggressive pornographic images. Afterwards, she had bathed the boy in warm bubbles amid floating plastic ducks and dolphins. Not that the life being displayed before him justified Lucero's actions. His sickness had been in him since birth, a bleak seed loitering in the cells of his growing body. The review had taken many days to accomplish. It was only after he watched himself mutilate and rape the last of his victims that Lucero had been escorted to the Department of Energy Realignment, and despite his shattered emotions, he understood the solemnity of the words Salvatore had spoken. Lucero, until your debt is paid in full, you will no longer be able to visit Earth for any type of learning. Your next succession of lives will be for the balancing of karma only. All will be ugly and all will be painful. Between those lives, you may remain under the care of those experienced enough to tend to even the most basic and out of balance of energies. Or you may head for the caves, the subterranean place of misery with which you are already familiar. It is your choice and you have 24 hours in which to make it. With an affirming nod from Salvatore, Lucero now made a tentative step towards Amarissa. Out of respect, he did not want to get too close. Lucero had not noticed her beauty when they had last met. All he had wanted to do was bite her flesh. Back then she had not been a person. She had had no value. Lucero could now see her as she truly was, a beautifully radiant being, enigmatic as she stood before him without a trace of accusation, smiling the smile of an angel. Amarissa offered Lucero her hand, leaving it to rest mid-air. He took several more steps towards her and touched her fingers with the tip of his, but quickly letting go as if they were the most fragile thing in the universe. Lucero looked down the line of olive-skinned faces and then deep into the eyes of each of his victims. None of the women had spoken. Intuitively, they had realised that it would be better just to be. Lucero drew in a breath of penitence so deep that when he spoke, his voice was low and unsteady. I am unable to describe how sorry I am. I am still unsure of how I could have done those things to you that I did, but I am no longer the monster that killed you. Please do not be scared of me. I would not hurt a ladybird. I beseech each one of you to find it within your hearts to allow me to do whatever I must to earn your friendship. It doesn't have to be now or any time soon. Lucero drew in another breath before delivering the words he had rehearsed in his head. He knew there would be no immediate conclusion, knew that perhaps there would never be. He deserved nothing. His voice was now steadier, but still heavy with remorse. I have chosen to balance my karma. Between lifetimes and as part of my healing, I will be attending the rose gardens here. I must come to terms with who I have been in order to become something new. It is very painful, and I'm not asking for your sympathy. I know who I am, and I know what I did to you. But if your hearts allow it, please come and find me. Lucero lowered his head and clamped his eyes shut to hold in the tears. When Amarissa spoke, he was not able to look up. I know that I have permission to speak on behalf of all the ladies here, and it is important that you know this. We forgive you, all of us, and we know where to find you. One day we will perhaps laugh. Do not think about us now. We are alive, karma-free, and blessed in ways you cannot imagine. Amarissa smiled, hoping Lucero would meet her gaze so he could see she meant every word. Lucero kept his eyes closed, but his body began to tremble and the tears he'd been struggling to hold in spilled out. Salvatore pulled Lucero to him, and with the support of a strong arm around his shoulders, Salvatore escorted his charge through the door and onto the bench in the hallway. "Wait here, my friend," he said as he lowered Lucero to the seat. "I won't be much longer." Salvatore walked back into the apartment and closed the door behind him. The women were still standing in front of the fireplace, the expression on their faces serene. Salvatore hugged each, pouring into their souls deep sentiments of gratitude. "What happens to him now?" asked Amarissa, her voice still gentle. "Well, he has chosen to remain with me and my team for a while. What happens next will depend on how receptive he is. When a suitable mother becomes available, he will re-enter the physical to meet his karma. This cycle will be repeated until atonement. Between lifetimes, you will see him back here at Eden. The plant life here, even the smallest of shrubs, emits a highly therapeutic energy that will greatly benefit him. If you choose to visit him, he will recognise you, but only as a vague and loose memory. It has been decided that recall of his totality will have to be suppressed and only released incrementally and sparingly. You may offer your support at any time through prayer. He will feel the intercession, even if he won't be able to quantify it. "We can do that," said Amarissa, taking Salvatore's hand. "And thank you for giving us this opportunity. I feel lighter and more alive than I ever had. It's almost unbearable." "Forgiveness has that effect," said Salvatore, squeezing Amarissa's hand. "Now, my lovelies, take good care and make sure you visit me. There will always be a table for you in my restaurant. Have I told you that I'm the best chef in the local universe?" "No, but I've heard it said, and we will come and see you. You can count on it," affirmed Garbine. "You make an old man very happy, and remember you haven't lived if you haven't tasted my meatballs." The women laughed. "Love you all and thank you," said Salvatore, blowing the ladies a handful of kisses as he made his way towards the door. Salvatore was smiling, glad that all had gone as well as he had hoped. But when he walked past the empty bench, he shook his head ruefully. He had suspected Lucero would buckle.